and I'm here stuck in Vienna where it's cold, no sunshine, and the food is, well, not so good.
Well, sir, mostly we are enjoying, but it will soon get hotter and it will be unbearable then.
Oh, are you complaining or are you bragging? I wish it were getting warmer or hotter here, but it's never. This is the longest winter I've ever been in, we feel.
I see, sir. I can understand.
I hope you do.
Yeah, very good afternoon to all of you. And this is our final day, and we have very long 2 weeks program. But you had some of you have given the feedback that this is too short event. So I guess that you wanted to have more weeks program, but we only had a little 2 weeks program due to the many other reasons. So also we could not organize it offline, that is face to face, due to many other restrictions with the funding institution like the Ministry of Education. So they wanted to have this one online only, virtual only. Anyway, you could join, and we're very glad that we are finally reached the final day of the event of the training course. So now welcome Professor Robert Brown once again. This is the final day, so over to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, you seem to have survived the course almost. Only 2 more hours to go, which is already something I can congratulate to you. I'll have a final presentation as promised, another example from another domain besides automobility. And then I wanted to do a wrap up, kind of quickly go through what my message to you was. And then obviously we can open up the floor and have an open discussion about how you thought this was going. I'll have a few questions to you on Mentimeter. And then we can think in terms of further collaborations. As we discussed yesterday, we already came up with a paper idea to write with Saradindu and Anup, maybe, on comparing the epistemologies of responsible research innovation and frugal innovation. But we can think of other collaborations should you be interested. So with this, I start sharing my screen as always, and here is the presentation. I hope you see full screen.
Yeah, it's visible now.
Okay, excellent. So let me jump into it. Just a little bit of a reminder. Here is our definitional pane. What responsible research and innovation means now. By now, you must know this by heart, so no need to show. Today, I want to talk to you about another version of the future. And this future is about datafication, onlineification, big data, and the likes. I have written a paper with some of my colleagues when the pandemic started, and we kind of did everything and anything online. Something that we're doing, unfortunately, 2 years down the road still. and how a more responsible research and innovation oriented onlineification in research can take place. And we have suggested a dialogue on responsible online research and innovation, which we called RRI, and how this can be used in the process of going online, making academic events and research activities more inclusive, how researchers can be more reflective on what they're doing and how they're doing it, and use processes that help through onlineification to respond to social needs and ethical concerns. Some of this was taken up, and there is an ongoing dialogue. However, as you can guess from what I've been telling you during these 2 weeks, I will think, or I suggest, that this is not enough. Traditionally understood, responsible online research innovation does not do the trick of changing and really taking care of our collective futures in our present. So today I want to connect 2 strands of literature in the academic domain and explain how these 2 strands might help to reevaluate our collective or shared futures in the datafication, onlineification domain. One strand of literature is about what's called critical data studies. Critical data studies, which emerged in the second half of the 2010s. So the first papers came out in 2016, and there is a discussion happening ongoing, mainly in the journal Big Data in Society, posits that there is much to be done with exploring the critical cultural and ethical challenges posed by what's called big data. Here, big data is referred to mainly as anonymized multi-data sets. However, it's also worthwhile to think what actually data is and how that could be maybe assessed as a representation of, or as a mode of being, or as a new virtual reality. So the main thrust of critical data studies is that, opposed to seeing data as scientifically,
then I told Bhuvesh, you should not sit here. Then bola Amita madam bhi bola tha.
I'm sorry, but I have to, yes, mute. Okay, so seeing data as opposed to the general perception that sees data as scientifically neutral, critical data studies suggests that the data, and definitely big data, are always already constituted within wider data assemblages. So data, and it's interesting because obviously data is used as it were in the singular, but we know that data is the plural of datum, and datum is, interestingly enough, not a digital entity, but datum is a theoretical construct. Actually, it is the center of the Earth as a point, and this datum, that is the center of the Earth, is serving as the reference to create mainly appropriate geographical renderings of the Earth as the globe. So we are, let me remind you again, we're using data as it were in the singular, but we have to be aware that data actually is a plural. Datum, that would be the singular, is interesting because it poses a number of questions. One, is it physical? Is it something that exists in physical reality? And actually it does. It does have, however small it is, it does have a physical, a physical being. And this physical being is then inscribed in some other physical entity that is a silicon piece that then is recording what the information of this data contains, or datum contains. And then it is obviously meshed together into some kind of data assemblage, combining different pieces of information, and a lot of stuff is happening in and by and with these data assemblages. And far from being neutral, when these things are happening to the data assemblage, this will then create cultural, ethical, and other social challenges. And we should reflect on this. So critical data studies introduces the idea that whereas natural scientists or computer scientists or physicists, but also the general public, would think that data and big data is an accurate representation of the world, whatever that would mean. And therefore, whatever happens in a datafied environment is a representation of what actually happens in a, and I'm using this word cautiously, real physical environment. I think, and there are a number of approaches that prove this, it's a little bit more complicated than that. At a more, at a simple level, the simple differentiation between physical and digital, or physical, virtual, or real and virtual, or real and unreal, become extremely complex when we look at datafied virtual environments. And I'll get to this in a moment. But there's another strand of literature that I want to call your attention to, and this is what's called Anthropocene studies. And Anthropocene studies tries to be cautious of the impacts of the anthropos, that is the human, on the world, and posits that whenever we place the beginnings of this geographic or geological era, it signals that humans have had a lasting and, in some aspects, devastating impact on our shared being. And this lasting impact warrants to call this era a new geological time, that is the Anthropocene. Some would argue that this Anthropocene starts in 1945 with nuclear bomb and the impacts of nuclear on Earth, and obviously the possibility of a man-made ruining of life on Earth, which is, if we think of the war that's happening a few hundred kilometers of where I am talking physically right now, that is between Russia and the Ukraine, I think that this is more than just pure theorizing, unfortunately. Some place it earlier, some place it in the 17th century or 16th century with the scientific revolution and the industrial revolution that stemmed from this process in the 16th and 17th centuries. And this is obviously doing much with the use of fossil fuels and the impact of fossil fuels on the Earth crust, and also the air surrounding the Earth. But others again place it way back to 30,000 years when the first humans turned from being hunting gatherers or foragers into agricultural beings, and took new forms of life on Earth, less moving around but becoming more stationary. Anyways, this is not our concern here. When this era did start, what I want to discuss is what Anthropocene and Anthropocene studies has as an impact on our ways of thinking. One, and that's important and relevant for us, is a profound criticism of Western modernity. It's called writing after the end of the world. The end of the world being the world as we knew it, or we wanted to know it. Along the lines I have been arguing, Anthropocene studies posits a turning away from the traditional modern binaries, human nature divide or social nature divide, and tries to think in human, non-human relational entanglements, how entities in the world or on Earth are related. And also, this is a theory that would want to enable alternative forms of thinking and of practice. And this is why it is very relevant for us, because I think without incorporating some of the findings or some of the main arguments of Anthropocene studies, or the ontological turn, as it is called. Obviously, Anthropocene studies is mainly human geography, stemming, but also the ontological turn in anthropology and also in science, technology, and society studies are relevant, and arguing some of the same things that I have been mentioning in the last few minutes. So these two strands of literature both are extremely relevant. And when we think of our future, and our future is everywhere datafication or big data imaginaries, I would want to dwell for a few minutes. What does this mean for us? Data and datafication in social terms, or the concept of data assemblage, originates from the French philosopher Deleuze, and he argues that this is a step from what he called discipline society to a control society. Discipline, the Foucauldian concept of governmentality, how modernity attempted to and was successful in controlling or governing, governing huge masses of people in a unified way, under the bracket of democracy or under the bracket of the nation state, and how, as we have been talking about, power, knowledge, institutions have emerged, and how the disciplining of the body and bodily movement and the interaction of bodies was executed through the madhouse, through prison, and what Foucault calls the scientific or the modernist gaze that was constantly watching over populations, and how other forms of discipline have emerged from general schooling, primary schools, to canonized knowledge, vernacular languages, and the likes, all of which are forms of governmentality disciplining large populations into one polity that then empowers and enables this polity to be politicized through policy and politics. However, Deleuze argues that we are witnessing, this is the 1980s when he's writing, we're witnessing a shift from discipline to control, and this control is executed through data and data assemblages, that are what he calls individualizing the individual, so cutting the in. In this process of individualizing, our being or our bodily and physical and also subjective existence is modulated, taken apart, and by datifying our existence and then these modularization, we are taken apart, and new forms of assemblages are being installed, and these assemblages, them being pretty black boxed, therefore we have very limited awareness and knowledge of how and what this is actually doing. Our life will be fully controlled by these black boxing data assemblages. Although this was not yet reality in the times when Deleuze was writing in the 1980s, but it seems, looking back from the 2020s and onwards, that his prophecy of these data assemblages controlling our lives was pretty much valid. What he thinks and what critical data studies took up as data assemblages are systems of thought, forms of knowledge, imaginaries, governmentalities, and legalities, materialities, and infrastructures, practices, organizations, institutions, basically everything where data is constituted, data is distributed, and data is connected with other forms of data. Basically, assemblages should be understood as structures that emerge as constitutive of big data, but also they're happening on multiple scales. They're happening on local, on regional, on national, international, and even global level. But more importantly, and this is where control comes to play, such assemblages exert power. And this exertion of power is what becomes the controlling, constitutive authority governing our lives in these black box environments. So data assemblages are powerful, complex entities that form the underlying production of big data science at multiple levels of abstraction and in multiple and the plurality of domains. Big data actually is not big data. Big data is actually power. And it is a form of power that Italian philosopher Giorgio Agamben called constituent power, originally unlimited, and it is based on violence that puts in place and constitutes a new law. This violence being the disruption of our ordinary being or ordinary lives under the new law that is the deified assemblage that has been assembled and that exerts this constituent power. Please remember what I said 2 weeks ago about thinking and the violence of thinking that disrupts, as Heidegger says, the thingliness of the thing. Here we see another disruption of the thingliness of the thing that is the world being disrupted by a violence that this time around is instituted by what we call big data or data assemblages. So trying to connect these two lines of thought, Anthropocene thinking suggests that Anthropocene has what's called hyper effects on humans, unintended and dispersed both in time and in space. Here are some of these trace elements, signatures left by modern societies like chlorine in ice cores or layers of mercury and radionuclides, black carbon on the crust and inorganic ash, etc. So there are dispersed trace elements that impact our lives in multiple ways. This is what Nixon calls slow violence. These distinct signatures are not only signatures, that is signs, but they are physical entities that are dispersed in both time and space that have effects on humans and also non-humans. Climate impacts, nothing new, growing levels of CO2 and the impacts of climate change, again, pushing people from their natural habitats, migration, refugees, also changing weather patterns and the likes. Homogeocene, which is the diminishing biodiversity and the extinction of specific species, which is, as we now know, are happening by the hundreds per day. So there is an enormous process of homogenization of our biology or biodiversity, and this will have a lasting, long-lasting, again, unintended and dispersed impact on both humans and non-humans. And also geomorphology, humans having instituted roads, drainage, water systems, so different networks that change not only the geography, but also the geology of the earth, and again having unintended and dispersed impacts on humans. So these are the kind of the troubles or the challenges that the Anthropocene poses us, and it is argued, obviously, that the Anthropocene is somewhat, or in a growing manner, the effect of causational thinking, systems thinking, that the natural world works as a machine, unintended and non-anticipated consequences, Cartesian subjectivity, and, as we discussed time and again, the birth of the knowing subject, and of the attitude of the human being in a command and control position over what the human, he or she, sees as the natural. So this is the Anthropocene thinking. And unfortunately, a lot of this is visible or traceable within the what's called the Internet of Things and the smart transition that is the impact of datafication. There are unintended and similar dispersed hyper effects, some of which I can call out: the inscrutability, creating new and inscrutable worlds, especially through AI and handing over specific decisions that humans have been making to machines. Clearly, a number of climate impacts from extractivism, mining, the disposal of batteries, increasing use of energy and electricity. When sustainability systems are called and when smart transition is referred to as something that will aid sustainability, one thing that nobody thinks of is the immense and unimaginable need for energy to run these systems. We do know already that the Googles and the Facebooks and other data-driven environments require immense amounts of energy, as does, for instance, cryptocurrency. So clearly, there is a growing need for energy in order to manage datafication. There is a homogeneous element in not only diminishing biodiversity, but by datafication diminishing human diversity and creating a number of epistemic biases. And geomorphology clearly impacts and effects of such datafied sustained systems and the imaginary of a technofix efficiency, which is the main ambit of our governing rationality within modernity and capitalism. So what we see is actually a number of challenges ahead of us. And interestingly enough, the criticism seems to be not taken seriously. What are the assumptions, I may ask? What are the assumptions, exclusions, contradictions, and possibilities that data exposes and promotes? Is there any social or social scientific reflection on the creation of data systems and the assumptions and exclusions and contradictions therein? What are the epistemological and ontological commitments that arise from data-driven approaches and operations? How is our world constituted to the epistemic and the ontological consequences thereof? Simple example, metaverse, as I assume you all have heard, the new venture of Facebook, which creates a virtual reality. And in this virtual reality, a woman who entered in the 7th minute of her entering with an avatar in this virtual environment was raped. And what does this actually mean, being raped in a virtual environment? Is that real? Is that unreal? Does penetration, as we understand it in sexual terms, physical, needed to cause something a rape? And does it have impacts? Not only virtual impacts, but impacts on our physical being. Does it create trauma? Does it create fear? Does it create a form of life that is very real from our perspective? And are we paying attention to these impacts? And this is obviously just one example out of many. So how are these commitments shaped and the knowledge is produced, and how are we asking questions or marching into such technological systems without reflecting on what they do to our life world. Are we asking the core questions? Is datafication a pathway to change, or is it business as usual? And it seems to me that whatever I and many others who are thinking along the lines I do are preaching, it seems to me as more business as usual on the way. And clearly, this will create more epistemic injustice that is related to knowledge. There will be more exclusion and silencing, more distortion or misrepresentation of meaning. There'll be oppression of certain practices, mainly communicative, interpretative, and growing distrust. And this is no surprise. We're seeing this across the board in mediated or datafied communication environments like social media. There will be ontological injustice impacts related to being actually wronged by the very fact of being constructed as a member of a certain social kind. And we see this already happening in datafied environments, being black boxed or the biases. There have been reports of AI systems being biased towards people of color or certain gendered behaviors replicated in datafied environments. And obviously, this adds up from the individual to the social, and there will be data injustice related to datafied societies, hampering of democratic procedures. Again, let me refer to the war that's happening in the neighborhood, and the war that's being fought not only by the might of arms, but also the might of social media and other datafied communication practices. The entrenchment of inequalities, we see that across the board. Again, discrimination and exclusion on the social level, deterioration of working conditions, home office being one, the fatigue that is caused by, for instance, Zooming that we're doing right now, and the dehumanization of decision-making, and again, handing over a multitude of decisions, ethical and others, to machines, and those machines being informed by machine learning, that is decisions and biases of the past, and a lot of negative interaction around sensitive issues. Although I've been preaching change, and change not only on changes of practice or changes of policy in responsibility, but also changes on epistemic and also ontological levels, it seems to me, and I'm not the only one, unfortunately, that both in the two examples I've been looking at, in automobility and in datafy or big data environments, these warnings, cries, or shouts are not reflected upon. And we're doing business as usual, more automobility through electrification and automation, and appropriating even more space, building more roads, causing more congestion, impacting more climate change, awaying some of the consequences to the global south from the global north, appropriating other types of spaces like the air and space, similarly as we did the surface of the earth by automobility. This is one datafication, as I've been telling you today. So all in all, and this is how I would want to close before I go to the summary. I'm not very optimistic. Rather, I am pessimistic. And every course I teach and every talk I give, I want to end with a warning note. Modernity, the governing rationality of modernity, that is capitalism, research and innovation, science, all this package that has been born or created in the 17th century has been created, interestingly enough, as extremely resilient and extremely resilient to its criticism. And to connect certain dots with what Saradundu and Anup have been talking about, CSR, corporate social responsibility, has been incorporated into capitalist business operations. Responsible research and innovation, as we know it, as policy, has been incorporated into engineering and again into innovation practices. Frugal innovation is or will be incorporated into research and innovation processes. But all this resilience keeps the basics the same. And both the Anthropocene and all the critical studies that I have enlisted have been talking in vain about how the basics should be changed. And so I want to leave you with this shout. Please reflect. Please reflect in your own worlds, in your own practices, beyond the usual suspects, beyond what you think you know. Responsibility may seem like a way out, may seem like an easy solution. However, it does not change and the impacts and effects that the Anthropocene, that is the Industrial Revolution and even before, has caused to our lives will at a certain point be detrimental to our existence for the future. On this not so positive note, let me hand over to Anup for a little while. If you have questions or comments, I stop sharing, and then I'll ask to have the floor again to go through the whole course as a summary and see what the takeaway message beyond this not so optimistic shout would be. Anup, over to you.
Yeah, very nice presentation. Very, I think we are to the data world, so we have many challenges with the data systems, particularly the system affecting the individual's privacy and also individual's identity. So these are the very socially concerned areas. I have a questions related to data challenges. So do you see that GDPR, that is General Data Protection Rules of Europe, is addressing all these issues, or we need to have some more,
I think
understanding of?
I think it doesn't, as you would have guessed, will be my answer. I think GDPR is both in many ways just a token. You click a few clicks and everybody does so, and then it's business as usual. But beyond this, I think issues of privacy or a lot of the things that is discussed under the rubric of responsibility today of datafied or artificial intelligence environments is just helping the same resilience that I have alluded to. My research in datafication is, I don't know if you've heard about the concept of data space. Data space being because there is a lot of data out there, and these data obviously comes from different data sources, and they are obviously different in many aspects. However, they might be useful across the board. So there's a movement in computer science and also in policy to create what's called interoperable standardized environments in which data can be exchanged. Thus, in my corner of the woods, I've been doing research on autonomous driving. Obviously, the original idea from DARPA in the 60s was to imagine a car that would have sensors, and with these sensors would make sense of the world around it, and that's how the automation would happen in the driving. And then this later was developed into what's called connected automobility. That is, it's not one car that has radars and at that point already sensors and lidar, but it's multiple cars, and these multiple cars or fleets would share with each other the information and learn from this sharing. But first, obviously, it was imagined that certain brands, so BMW, would have systems that all BMWs would share the data and then learn from each other's cars' experiences. And then the automobile industry took up this and said that, oh, this is not good, because then the BMW will be learning something different than the Volkswagen. Therefore, we need to put all the data together, and everybody could share and use the data that is being shared. So data will be interoperable and everybody could access it. Every car and every brand can access it. But then they realized, again, a few years in, they realized that there is a lot of data out there, data from the energy company, data from the lighting company, data from the road maintenance company, etc. So there are multiple forms of data that could also be used by these cars that are, or these AIs that are operating the car. So this posed the problem, and this is where we are right now, that there are multiple sources of data, and it would be great if certain data space would be created, which would not be a physical space, that is a server on which this data would be collected, but it would be data stored on multiple locations, but data could be interoperable and anyone could use any data based on a certain protocol or based on certain access rights. And here we kind of are already in the brave new world in which data is flying around. We have absolutely no control over whose data, what is data, how is it cooked, how is it traveling, how is it substituted, how is it changing, how is it meshed, how is it connected. And this then will result in a new world. And I am not saying this figuratively, but very seriously. And this new world will be much more command and control, but not commanded and controlled by humans, but mainly by decisions taken by artificial intelligence, which then will become absolutely inscrutable to our human thinking or human being. It's a frightening picture. And what's even more frightening is that this is pretty well advanced in the European Union. And not only is it pretty well advanced, but it's almost in trial phase. And no social scientists have ever been asked to bring his or her experience, knowledge to the table. It's engineers and policymakers who are creating and discussing this new world for us. And social science is just not sitting at the table. We are writing our papers in our little silos. Nobody is listening to us. And when they are listening to us, then the answers we normally got is that, well, such problems will be dealt with once the technology is ready, once interoperability is done, once standardization is taken place, etc. By that time, most of the decisions have already been made. So beware. So this was the long answer. The short answer, Anup, no. GDPR is not the solution. Siddharth.
Okay. Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, I have a comment and then I have a kind of an addition to what you presented. So my comment is you mentioned big data is power, right? And like considering that, let's go back to Francis Bacon's idea of knowledge is power. Can we effectively change now to big data is power?
I don't see a contradiction between knowledge being power and data being power, because data is knowledge. It is a form of knowledge, the difference being that it is not human knowledge. And it's operating in very different ways than human knowledge does. And not only is it operating in very different ways than human knowledge does, but it's pretty unscrutable how it is operating in a different way than human knowledge does. So I think if you want to frame it in Francis Bacon's terms, yes, big data is power, and it is power both on a different scale. And when I alluded to the lack of, or the impact or effect of limiting human diversity, then this is what I alluded to. Big data, which is by some named as the new oil, because there will be a lot of value, a capitalist value extracted from it. And as we see from Google and Facebook and the likes, that these values can be extracted best on a global scale. And therefore, not only will there be power, knowledge, but it will be power on a global scale, which will then limit the diversity of local knowledges. And this is, again, something we have been talking about in respect to global north versus global south. But obviously, this is south-south, north-north. Obviously, there are local knowledges across the board, multitude of global knowledge or of local knowledge that add up our knowledge pool. But datafication, especially when power is exerted on a global scale, will diminish this diversity, knowledge diversity, and will unify and will simplify. So will homogenize our knowledge. Actually, that has already been taking place with schools that I alluded to. So again, yes, absolutely. Power, knowledge, and data is intertwined in a very dangerous and growingly dangerous mix. And as said, in the name of efficiency, in the name of extracting financial value, social science or these kinds of reflections that I shared with you over these 2 weeks are shoved aside as irrelevant, but more importantly, that limits the ability of the key players to extract the value they would want to see extracted.
Okay, sir. And sir, I think you have very well put it. I mean, I was also
I'm paid for that. Don't forget, that's what I'm paid for, to put it
Okay.
well.
Well, sir.
No, I'm just
Sir,
joking. I'm
also,
just joking.
I could think of this when you were mentioning unintended and dispersed hyper effects of humans, and you specifically mentioned homogeneity, which is the diminishing biodiversity and extinction. I had this thing in my mind, which is the diminishing linguistic heritage, to be precise, in the digital space and the age, and not just diminishing, but the very idea of lack of linguistic diversity in the digital or the cyberspace altogether. And there's this a magazine, a monthly magazine called Seminar, which is kind of published in India, and they organize symposiums, regarding a certain topic. And in June 2021, they organized a symposium which was specific. They published this magazine which specifically talked about the the scenario of languages in the digital age. And they kind of mentioned this specific problem of how the regional language data, there is a lack of regional language data and knowledge base on the digital space. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, how do we tackle it? Shall we start say, assimilating all the several knowledge bases which are in different languages on the digital space, or is it better to have a common language of exchange, which is say English in the current scenario? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, thank you for the question. This is ingenious, absolutely. And I have two trajectories of thought that I would want to share with you. One is that not only language or linguistic, but also not independently cultural diversity is obviously diminishing. And the second is that, and this is a great example of how discipline gives way to control, that actually just the opposite is suggested. It is suggested that the digital, with its immense abilities of storing, that is, its immense abilities of remembering, will be an excellent repository of both the linguistic and the cultural heritage, except we see that it's not. And just the opposite, as you alluded to, just the opposite is happening. And this is part of the fallacy, but also part of the unlearning of those who manage these processes, because they are engineers. And I don't want to, put all the blame on engineers. Let me rather say engineering thinking that thinks that what is possible by technology is the only thing that will happen, and no unintended or dispersed consequences will take place, because they are not within their systemic mechanistic causational logic. And they're kind of surprised when actually they do, but that's too late, obviously. And then they shout to the social scientist, come and solve this social problem that emerged unintentionally. And I think it's a great moment in time, and your question is perfect to show that it's a great moment in time when we're before all the consequences. Today, we could act upon them, but we don't. And rarely in moment of time, we see certain already tragic consequences that are going to happen, and multiple others will, that we can't even begin to imagine. And still we're not acting upon them. So it's not climate change, which is here, and we should have acted 1,000 years ago, but we didn't. And now we're doomed. But much of this is happening from now to the future, and we're not acting upon it. And I think this is the real problem, that As Santayana has said once, historian, that those who are not learning from their past are doomed to repeat it. And this is exactly what we're doing. We haven't learned from our past, and we're doomed to repeat it. And what we have not learned from climate change and the Anthropocene and many other things, automobility included, we are now repeating. Except we're repeating it with bigger speed and on bigger scale. And this is frightening to me. And much of the talk that has been taking place and let me be critical of responsible research innovation. Much of the talk that has been going on responsibility is just helping do more of the same and not actually reflect upon the real problems that require our attention. So that was, again, like Anup, this was the long answer. The short answer, yes, I think it diminishes the human diversity linguistically and culturally. And I think that's, and I'm not definitely, while it's great that we're talking in English, which is obviously a colonial heritage, and thus we can understand each other. But I think once this enters into global force on a bigger scale, then yes, languages and cultures will just be evaporating. And that's, well, pretty tragic as well. Abhinandan.
Hello. Hi, good afternoon. I was having some questions, but Siddharth's questions actually put me to place some of the things in the similar line. I'm a teacher, and I have been teaching for last 12 years in an institute like Tata Social Sciences. And many times I faced students coming from different geographies, especially from remotest part of India, and especially from indigenous communities. And they struggle to write English whenever it comes to any article or any report here. So once we had a session, and at some point I asked a question, which actually at some point make the students come near to me, and thinking that maybe I have given them the actual answer of their problem. Because they were not able to express, I said, maybe you might be thinking in your mother tongue. So that was the clue, because they were able to express in their mother tongue, but they were not able to, correlate with something called a lingua franca, like English, or sometimes many times with Hindi as well. Because the problem with the language is, I'm not saying, sorry, I'm using the word problem, but it's not a problem, it's a challenge actually. The challenge with the language is that in a place like in Guwahati, where I'm from in Northeast, the Assamese language which I'm speaking in my local day-to-day life, it do not have any gender component when it comes to non-living materials, okay? But when it comes to Hindi, you have a, like we say, lorry aati hai, truck aata hai. Lorry and truck both are actually materials, okay? And they have been given a gendered issue, like, one is a she and one is a he. But when it comes to our Assamese, or say, when I don't know any other languages, there is no component of gender for non-living parts. So again, there's a problem that how you actually perceive when it comes to linguistic diversity, and whether at some point a universal lingua franca will be a solution, or will be actually addressing more problems on the platform. This is number one. And second thing, I was just thinking, because I read some of the papers from your portal, what you have, through Anup, I shared. I was revisiting the endless frontier, as was being talked by so-called Vannevar Bush. And I was thinking that responsible innovation maybe at some point correlate. This is with an endless frontier, because it's about exploration. It's about respecting certain theory of change. At the same time, keeping in mind denominators like climate change, which has been brought many challenges on the forefront. But then I was trying to again go back and ask that if something we talk about like endless frontier, where is the position of bounded rationality here? Well, can endless frontier can actually be have some bounded rationality? Because when you talk about yesterday, I was following up on Dr. Bhaduri's point regarding if I'm not mistaken, he talked about commons. Okay, when a community has certain common property issues, there is a bounded rationality. So within bounded rationality, they have been, throughout the lifetime, they have been managing the natural resource management. And you did talk about Anthropocene, the challenges that are coming across. So in this whole idea, when you talk about frontier lines, and at the same time, you have challenges like, you have to maintain the resources vis-a-vis this bounded rationality concept, where we technically be pitching. And finally, I just remembered this Bogota manual, which actually is about the innovation as a framework, because we have read about Oslo, but this Bogota manual was also talking at some point about regarding accommodating the socio-economic parameters when it happened later on in Latin America, and how it has actually brought a new amendment to the understanding of innovation framework. So these are some of the observations which I like to definitely, I thought maybe at some point I should pitch in and ask you that, because I know you might not be having direct answers, but somewhere down the line, the thought process has to start on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Both lines of thought are very relevant, and what you have mentioned in India is obviously a living reality in Europe, with a much smaller landmass than India, but a huge number of different languages, cultures, etc. I myself was born in Hungary, not very far from here, 200 kilometers from here, with and grown and raised in Hungary and Hungarian, very different language than German, which I speak in the culture I live now, which is Austria. And we're talking now English, and much of my work, which is academic, which is on the global scale, is happening both reading-wise and talking-wise and writing-wise in English. So absolutely, and however well I speak English, I will never be able to express myself. And as a philosopher, this is a strong and big limitation I have. I will never be able to express myself as well, or at least what I think well is, as I could in my mother tongue, that is Hungarian. So absolutely, I think that this diminishing linguistic or cultural diversity that Siddharth and you self have been asking or alluding to is a very serious problem or challenge, as you put it. Maybe in 500 years there won't be multiple languages, but we can say that it will be a loss, not only because of some of us not being able to express him or herself, but because all the cultures that these languages and linguistic realities brought about will be lost, just as much as indigenous ways of thinking and indigenous cultures have been lost by the scientificization of our epistemic thinking. And the second, bounded rationality is not a concept that I would subscribe to, partly because it is extremely human-centered and human agency driven, whether it's satisfaction or whether it's optimization that's happening. But in the end of the day, bounded rationality is a concept that imagines control as human control, and not as the control of dispersed and distributed agency that I subscribe to in my thinking. But more importantly, I think I would, from the endless frontier thinking, I would emphasize the frontier, because the frontier was actually the way how the political way, and here I refer to Siddharth, the political way and the political agenda of the American East to appropriate the American West. And the frontier thinking was, again, a colonial thinking of appropriating territories that were imagined to be terra nullius. Nobody lived there. Nobody owned them. So we can take it away. I don't have to remind you about colonization in India, of course, but while frontier has been heralded as the quintessential American way of life and attitude in the 19th century, it was a form of bloody colonization. It was colonizing lands and taking away lands by many times killing those indigenous First Nation people who were actually living there. So I think frontier thinking is dangerous. It's a continuous settler colonialist attitude. And in my corner of the woods, in automobility, what I am trying to write about and tell my academic audiences that what has happened in automobility is appropriating the earth surface will be happening through appropriating air, and how these aerial manned or unmanned vehicles are being innovated and being distributed or deployed is a similar frontier thinking. There is, nobody lives in the air because we don't see them, because we don't see the multiple entities that are actually in there, and also the impacts that occupying and appropriating the air will cause to even humans. So I am as critical of frontiers thinking as I am critical of modern rationality. I don't know if this was a good enough answer, but I'm trying to think along rather than answer.
It's good. Like even the way you're exploring, that gives me more scope to know it further.
Excellent. Swati, and then we'll have a break.
No, actually, one thing, we want to continue our question and answer after we have some wrap-up session. So if you permit, so we already have with us Professor Patnaik, who is GIAN coordinator with us. And before handing over to him, Professor Satyabrat Patnaik,
just hold on, Dr. Das. I think a very interesting discussion is happening. We can always delay these valedictories. I mean, I have no problem in.
Okay.
So at the end of your session, then we'll just have a brief valedictory or whatever you want to call it, and there I would just put forward my views on responsible research and innovation. I'm a scientist by training, so I would also give 5 minutes of my understanding of what are the issues there. So I think valedictory function can wait. Let this discussion continue, and then at the end, whenever you are free, then you just let me know. And
okay. Then I will call Sati to give your remarks. Okay.
Actually, I completely agree with the whole argument that situation is really grim. So what I see, like I want to, I see it as like Kafka's imagination of permanent surveillance of the society. So I think this whole data collection regime, actually how in the way the data is collected, it's kind of like you are being subjected to a continuous surveillance and a move towards more controlled and that governed reality, which is more in the line of what George Orwell's imagination of a society where Big Brother is always watching you. And then we don't know actually when we are watched and like when our data is already collected, actually that's very problematic. And the situation is really grim, but still I want to give and what to say, an example which is very good. The Google, actually. Google is a giant who's like collecting big data and working on artificial intelligence and all those things. So last year, they wanted to bid for a federal government's $10 billion project in which the drones were supposed to collect the data. And that data could have been used for any purposes. So 4,000 employees of the Google who were working in the artificial intelligence unit, they signed a petition and that they'll resign if their technology is going to be used for some such kind of purposes like war or such unethical practices. So Google has to came out with a value statement. And the value statement is that their technology, especially artificial intelligence related, can never be used for war and such kind of purposes or collecting such kind of data. So that was one kind of initiative where people or what to say, they were engineers, but definitely they are experts also, but they also have ethical concerns. And so I think a training like ethical training, this kind of ethical trainings or tools provided to them, because I came across certain toolkits which makes such experts or provides some experts insights so they can become aware about the biases or ethical implications of such technologies before coming to that. So I think this could be a way to go through and another thing what I have came across, what I have read about this thing, that there is enough fear within like corporates or like experts who are or firms which are coming up with these technologies, that transparency is against their business interest. So in the second lecture, Bhaduri sir discussed that, and I also agreed with that the economic rationale from the this like innovation, it still plays very central role. So if there is a strategy which we can or through RRI or through some other policies or initiatives, there can be a situation where it's a win-win model, because more it's not like that actually, it's matter of an intention. And like if the corporates or firms could be convinced that it's a win-win situation, if they become genuinely transparent, they can have more consumer trust and they can expand their consumer base, then there can be a way, I see a way forward in that direction. But still there is it's right now it's a inherent tussle between surveillance and privacy actually. So I want to ask Robert, what is like European Commission's take on this actually? Because I've read a lot, like European Commission is pushing RRI and then coming up with what are the like core values and to integrate into policies and incentivize and all those things. So what is like European Commission's take on this? Like?
Okay, thank you, Swati. I think this is extremely relevant and important issues that you raise. And I don't want to disappoint you, but I'll have to. First the theory and then what the European Commission is doing. The theory. I think what you have just mentioned as an example, and then what you deducted from that example, that certain Google employees have petitioned not to use, and then a value statement has been forwarded that the use of data is forbidden in war. That's a bloody lie. The Russians are bombing specific locations in the Ukraine where Google Maps show that a lot of people are present. So actually Google data is being used as we speak for war purposes. Awful as it is, I don't think that value statements can stop what's called dual use. The same data that will help you to navigate congestions, because it shows that in a certain locations there are a lot of people, will be used by whoever wants to use it for either war activities or terrorist activities for that matter. So So value statements don't help. Also, if Google drones are not being used for collecting data, there are multiple companies that have both drones and satellites out there, which actually help a lot for us lay people to understand what's going on in the war, because we now have access to what's called OTIN, which is intelligence information that's publicly available by these satellites. That information is being shared, and this gives us lay people or journalists or whatever access to the tragedy that's happening in this war. And I think that's very relevant. So previously, all this data was only used by governments for secretive purposes, and now they're in the open, and that's great. So dual use can happen both ways. Some uses that are bad will be complemented by such uses that are better, but it can obviously work the other way around. So I don't think that value statements, and I don't think that privacy laws, and I don't think that that petitions will help the practices to be used for malign purposes. And I think that's part of what Siddharth and Abhinand and myself were trying to say. I think, and this is now trying to go into the second of your question, I think the European Commission is with you in this, and things partly because obviously the European Commission is not an independent entity, but the European Commission is a proxy to industrial interests, business interests, national security interests, and many other interests. So it's obviously it's a political institution that governs a multitude of different interests, many of which are of economic nature or securitization nature, etc. And so they have to walk a thin line between attending to these interests and also doing something good. And as I see it now, one of the reasons, and this is something I've been talking about in, I think, 2 lectures ago, that the competitiveness drive and the economic interest drive is pushing RRI, even as we know it, to a back burner in the European Commission. And many of the other responsibility-driven agendas are being pushed to a back burner because there's a strong push towards growth and economic interests and technological sovereignty issues, and not losing out in technological leadership in certain areas, artificial intelligence and quantum computing being specific territories. Obviously, the automotive industry, which is one of the drivers of European growth, is a big lobby power to push towards electrification and towards automation. The negative impacts which we have been talking about today also. So while the European Commission, let's say, is trying, there are competing interests, and these competing interests are, as we see today, stronger than those which are pushing towards responsibility, even in the form as we know it, let alone in the form I suggest that we should take it in the future. So I have few friends only within the Commission who would support the change I am suggesting.
Thank you.
I would suggest, if Anup agrees, that that now we have the break, or I don't know if you want Professor Patniak, you want to do it before the break or after the break, or as a closing word after my summary? The choice is yours.
Well, I mean, my only constraint is that I will be for next 15 minutes, but I understand that your summary would be somewhat lengthy. So maybe I just give my 2 pence of analysis.
We're all ears.
Okay,
we're all
sure.
ears.
And the very important point, and I would submit that difference of opinion on this. At least what I listened over the last half an hour on the data collection and the right and wrong. So this is so first of all, let me thank all the participants and Professor Brown for agreeing to JNU's request to be the lecturer for this GIAN course on responsible research and innovation, conceptual framework and practice. Well, at the outset, I must confess that I should have attended some of the lectures for my own benefit. I haven't done that. I must apologize. But now, within the last half an hour, what I could hear, it would have been a good training occasion for myself, but I have missed it. But I understand that Professor Brown is a regular visitor to JNU. And so there would be occasions when we'll interact, and that would be, I'm looking forward to it. And several of you may or may not have come to JNU, and I actually didn't study at JNU at all. I came very late. In 2002, I joined JNU. My entire education was in an IIT system, and then I moved to US and came back and joined. In fact, in my School of Physical Sciences, there's not a single faculty who is from JNU. And I always say this, JNU, I mean, it took me 5 years to understand JNU, but it is 1,400 acres of land surrounded by reality. It's very unreal. I mean, it's very, very unreal in the sense that this is probably only humanities-centric university in our country. I mean, there is a difference between Harvard and MIT. I mean, though both are excellent, there is a difference between Cambridge and Oxford. There is an emphasis of skill-driven, product-driven, job-driven institution in India, and IITs have been part of that for almost 10 years. I know the insecurity in that system, but humanities require a different approach to life. And it is, I would say that JNU has that, from the very inception, that questioning of the authority. And then, we are a, very, very diverse society. There is caste, there is economic deprivation and all this. So JNU has a very, very central role. And our university is a newspaper most of the time, mostly for the good reasons, and sometimes not for good reasons. But in defense of JNU, I always quote Bernard Shaw, where he says that a reasonable man adapts himself to the society. An unreasonable man persists in trying till the society adopts him. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man. And so I don't want to justify discontent and this kind of walking on the street and shouting, but there is a need for that if you are a dreamer of change in the society. So JNU plays a very, very important role. And as I'm a trained physicist, I work in low temperature physics, far away from the humanistic approach of JNU, but there is a role of JNU that plays across the academia in India, and that cannot be negated at all. So whenever you have time, please, now that the COVID, there is a relaxation, we will look forward to each participant, particularly Professor Brown, to visit us again in JNU, and maybe through GIAN or some other mechanism, we would reassemble again. This is a seminar on responsible research, and I have actually deep questions on that. And I confess that I should have attended some of the lectures to fine-tune my arguments. But essentially, I work in a field called superconductivity. In housing and wherever you are, there is electricity, and the electricity is carried by copper or aluminum. The element that is used, the metal that is used to carry electricity to your home is copper or aluminum. I work in this material called superconductor, which have zero electrical resistance. Copper has finite resistance. So when a current flows, there is a loss. Therefore, you have to pay electric bill every month. In a superconductor, electrical resistance is 0. Once you set in a current, it stays for all times to come. There is no decay of current because there is no resistance. The only problem is that it happens at very low temperature. So that's my, penny of contribution, or there is some kind of that I am doing responsible science. My next door neighbor works in string theory. Some of you might know string theory is the subject which is probably closest or most foundationally most correct, acceptable theory about the creation and the universe today. But it is a mathematical model of, so you must have heard about the Big Bang and all that, but most mathematically accurate model that explains the physical basis of the universe is the string theory. And string theory is solvable in 26 dimensions. As human beings, we cannot think of 4 dimensions. We are limited by 3 dimensions, X, Y, Z axis. We cannot think of the 4th dimension if the each axis is orthogonal to 90 degrees to one another. But as you know, if there is a 3-dimensional object, you can sketch it in 2-dimensional paper. Similarly, a 4-dimensional object can be drawn in the 3rd dimension. So people have drawn a 3-dimensional object. That's a replica of the 4th dimension. So 26 dimension, it is solvable, and I'm telling you the most comprehensive, most acceptable theory about the creation and all the forces and the interaction of the string theory. Should I say that it has no use and therefore it is irresponsible science in today's world in a developing country? Let's take a more direct another example. Oppenheimer. He is the father of the kind of atomic bomb, and the Hiroshima and Nagasaki primarily happened because of the success of Oppenheimer in developing that technology. E equal to mc square is an equation. You can generate nuclear power. You can also make atomic bomb. It is only our ethical or the moral aspect of the present generation. There have been 6,000 years of this civilization. This is 14.6 billion years since the universe was created. At least 4 billion years since the earth was condensed. Over the last 100 years, our ethical and moral strictures do not accept that this is right or this. Using E equal to mc square for generating electricity is a responsible technology. Using E equal to mc square for creating nuclear bomb and killing 1 million people instead of probably 20 million, if the bombs were not dropped, Japanese would have continued, and that's a defense of Oppenheimer gives somewhere. It would have continued for many, many years, and many more people would have died. I mean, I'm not getting into the ethical and moral issue. So this aspect that in our lifetime of 80 years or 90 years, we are saying what is responsible science and what is irresponsible science is a very difficult, kind of conclusion to draw. I'm not suggesting that war is a necessity. I'm not suggesting that Google Maps is not being misused by Russians. But Google Maps, the advantages of Google Maps is far, far, far more than the misuse, the minuscule misuse that might be, or whatever, the marginal misuse that might be happening. I mean, there are different, for that, for example, data collection. Google might be using a lot of data. I can tell you, I have traveled in train, traveled in plane, and the corruption in getting a reserved berth in Indian Railway, even till 2002, was such a challenging thing. I mean, you have to drive the TTE to get a reserved berth in train. It is a very common experience for most of us. The data that is collected or the transparency that is there in booking a ticket now, that is, I mean, all I'm trying to convey is that even if Google collects all my personal data, and there is technology that can misuse some of the data against me, waging a war or putting a bomb, overall, in the scale of the humanity, in the scale of the things evolved for a civilization, in any case, that is quite clear evidence now that the human civilization has regrown 7 times. It is not the only time. It is not the last 6,000 years human beings are there. This is like the cycle of complete elimination of all creatures, almost all creatures, and revival has happened 7 cycles or 6 cycles. This is probably the most complicated one where the human beings are ruling and destroying the planet through their own ambition of, in using environment in their own. So our estimation that what is and what is right and what is wrong over our lifetime of 20, 30 or 80 or 90 years, and blaming and saying which is responsible technology and which is irresponsible technology, one needs to be very, very careful. As I was telling you, I mean, so essentially in science, there is a driving, feature now that if you do something that immediately helps society, then that is a responsible technology. Something there is no evident use of the society, that could be responsible technology. I give you an example. There is a great British mathematician by the name George Boole. I think born around 1850, died around 1860. His great contribution is what is called Boolean algebra. He had this intuition that all natural numbers can be written as a combination of 0 and 1, right? So whether it is 2 or 255 or 623 or 5 lakh, any number, any natural number can be written as a combination, as represented as a combination of 0 and 1. He had no idea that that can be any application. It's just a mathematical puzzle that he was solving. Was that responsible science in taxpayers' money? Come around 1920, I think there was, innovative people could understand that 0 could represent off state, 1 could represent on state. All the information that is stored in your hard disk, where you're storing these Zoom lectures, this is stored in magnetic beads. So magnetic beads, these are small small magnets. If they're aligned in one direction, you can say it is one state. If they're aligned in the anti-parallel direction, you can say it is 0 state. All informations, actually, the processing happens because of Boolean algebra. So which one is responsible science at present? Which one is, and computers have been used for wrong things as well. So George Boole, when he was developing this Boolean algebra around 1840s or 1850s, had no idea. So he was the pioneer researcher of I don't know whether we call it responsible or irresponsible. It was probably neutral innovation. And then based on that, you have computer, and you have revolutionized the life of every citizen, everyone in the planet through the advent of computer. And now, if the computer is used positively or negatively in this time scale that we live, and then we brand it, and this is responsible and this is irresponsible, I don't know how fair we are. Well, these are my brief comments. I just to provoke you, and I am again sorry that I couldn't attend this set of lectures, but these are recorded, and most warm welcome to Professor Brown whenever he has time to come back to JNU and discuss these things in more detail. And I must thank our coordinators, Dr. Das and Professor Saradendu Baduri, who have taken this initiative. This is COVID time, and this has happened, and we're very happy, and particularly the participants also, if they have gained something and built up a network, that it is not just the knowledge that you've got or the intellectual refinement that you have achieved, some amount of what is happening in the field, who are the pioneers, who are contesting this view. If you have a grasp of that subject, then I think we have been very successful, and we're very happy about that. Thank you, Professor Brown, and thank you, Dr. Das, and thank you, Saradendu, for this conducting this course. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Patna, for your wonderful presentation, and also giving an idea about JNU. And most of the participants are not from JNU, so we also welcome again to JNU campus whenever they have time, and whenever they can join any other event. So also, I would like to say that we have very good or very positive feedback from the participants. We around 40 participants are participating in this 10 days program, and few of them have some problem with the GIAN registration, but all of them have registered with JNU, so I think we can consider them for the certificate, but they have to register with the GIAN as well. And I think tomorrow is the last date for registering. Because
If there
tomorrow
is
is
a problem, then I think what you can do is that send the name that people are finding it difficult. But main thing is the registration in GIAN IIT Kharagpur site. JNU thing is a local thing; you can handle it anytime. But the register is maintained and the funding, why, how has it? So the question comes from IIT Kharagpur. So I would request all participants to really register for the GIAN Kharagpur. The JNU one or the money that you have to pay, that we can take care of. If there is funding constraint, then we can waive it. But everyone is requested to do it at IIT Kharagpur because they are actually GIAN MHRD is funding this course, and they need to have some kind of register where these many participants registered for the course and your honest feedback. I mean, we always look for opportunity to improve, but your honest feedback is every participant should give an honest feedback. There is a feedback form, and Dr. Das, please circulate, and everyone should fill it up. The feedback form. Right? Yeah,
actually, I created one Google form based on the feedback form because most of the participants are outside.
That is fine. That is fine.
Yeah.
But I think I would request that all participants must register at the GIAN IIT Kharagpur site. If there is a problem, please give a call to Ram Singh. I think he will sort it out. If they are not able to get a login or password or any problem.
Okay. I'll share his phone number so that they can coordinate with Ram Singh.
Since tomorrow is the last date, so it is better that really do it on the holy day. So because after that, registering has no meaning. I mean, at least you can be delayed. Registration can be delayed, but not after the end of the course.
Okay. Thank you very much for your insightful thought about that. And also over to Professor Robert.
Yes, just a few comments on my side. Thank you very much, Professor Patniak, for the very interesting comments. And I want to take your word that you invite me back. I think I would love to be on GNU campus again. This obviously I've expressed time and again that in India and the GNU is dear to my heart. And I think the issues you raised are very important. And I think what is more important is that there must be a constant dialogue between the different points of views. And this is also something you have alluded to. And obviously, people who have been educated in the natural sciences have a different view of many things. Not better or worse, but different, because that's the tradition they have been educated in, and that's the work they're doing. And I think, and this is something that's happening, and hopefully more is on the way, that STEM and SSH, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics types of studies should bring themselves nearer to SSH or social sciences and humanities. And there's a lot of talk, unfortunately too little doing in interdisciplinary work. And I think more interdisciplinarity is definitely required, partly to understand each other's ideas, but also to bring to the world ideas that contain elements of both worldviews. I think you pointed to an extremely important debate in mentioning irresponsibility as an antidote to responsibility. And I think that's one of the discussions to be had, because in the appropriation of responsible research and innovation, the antidote is definitely not irresponsible research and innovation. So people who do not follow the awareness of the social impacts are not irresponsible or not doing irresponsible science. They're just doing science. And I think what we're trying to preach is that this dichotomy of responsibility and irresponsibility should be substituted with a different way of reflecting upon, rather socially reflecting upon the foreseeable and the unforeseeable impacts that our scientific doing is creating in the world, some of which obviously will be negative, some of which will be positive, some of which could be assessed, and some of which cannot be assessed within the time frame, because we can only imagine what we can imagine. So definitely, one comment I want to make is that what we are trying to talk about is effects and impacts, and offer methods and ways of thinking how at least what can be imagined is imagined. And I think that's what we're preaching, not the dichotomy of irresponsibility versus responsibility. Also, you're absolutely and perfectly right in saying that within the science ontology, all of what you have been saying is important, relevant, and responsible. This is why I have been suggesting, and I am also sorry that you were not here, because we could have had a wonderful conversation. This is why I've been suggesting that we also need to think in terms of ontology. What is the world? What exists? What are the entities therein? And how are they in relation? How are they connected? That may offer us a different version of science. And that may offer us a different version of seeing the world, or seeing things in the world that we wouldn't see otherwise. And that may be instructive. And one statement, definitely I'm not anti-science, and definitely I'm not anti-technology. So, the traditional accusation of my kind is, okay, so you want to send us back to the Stone Age? Of course not. I love technology, and I also love science. My father is a scientist, and I think that it's again not a binary, for or against technology, for or against science. It's what, whose, which technology we are forwarding, and what can we do to avoid the negative implications of specific technologies. So the question is, do we want more data? Of course, data is great. Do we want to be better connected across the globe? Of course we do. Is this great, what I'm doing now? Could these 20-some people listen to me, and could I talk to these 20-some people if there was not Zoom or something along those lines? Of course I couldn't, and that would be a lesser good world if this exchange would not take place. So I'm not anti-technology, and none of us is, but still that should not stop us on reflecting on this wonderful technology that we're using now, Zoom, what negative impact it may have, and how can we address those negative impacts, kind of bettering the technology, and also not only the technology, but also the epistemologies, so that is the knowledges and the worldviews that are behind these technologies. So all in all, I think we're not that far apart, if I may say. And I think as in the good old Greek philosophy times, a lot of the great ideas emerged from conversations, and those conversations should be from by people who have different opinions, because if they have similar opinions, then not much new is coming out of that. So what I can definitely both suggest and promise, that if there is a need and request and opportunity to continue or to extend such conversations also in person, then I'm more than happy to do so.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Brown. Thank you.
Thank you. And so we should have a break of 10 minutes. That means we should regroup at 1 o'clock my time, which is, I assume, 4:30 your time.
This is 5:35. 5:30.
5:30. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So just okay. Now I just missed 1 hour, not 1.5 hours. So okay. So let's meet in 10 minutes, and then we
Okay.
can wrap up and say goodbye.
Okay. Thank you.
So guys, welcome back. I hope you are back. And let's continue then. Anup. Anup, can I continue? Okay, he's not here yet, so we have to wait for a few more seconds or minutes.
So, Professor Robert Brown, welcome again. So we are ready for the resuming the session.
Excellent. So I will start sharing my screen in a moment. Here we are. You should be seeing my screen summary.
Yeah, it's visible now.
Okay, I'll try to be quick and open the floor then to comments, should you have one, and also for some feedback on Mentimeter. So the quick summary, what we have been trying to work our way through is from war of beliefs to peace of beliefs. And the war of beliefs was looking for certainty, and the peace of beliefs understands that certainty is multiple. So basically, my story, I promised, was to ask what is the real, who we are, and what the real is, what history, whose history, what politics, what does thinking mean, and to whom what done of what. I know much of these problems, questions were pretty philosophical, but at least for one, you heard philosophical problems discussed, and I hope that that helped to clarify what you think both about science and responsible research and innovation. What I promised also is that I will be talking in the framework of governance and the dispositive that is an apparatus, and I'll offer you beyond episteme, I'll offer you also an ontological understanding of what our human condition is, and for me that's what responsible research and innovation is. This is the glossary words that we've been using, and obviously I'll upload this so you'll have it for further reference. We started with a quest for certainty in the 17th century Europe, war of beliefs, and the emergence of the scientific revolution. And obviously this created science as an ontology, as we've been discussing in the previous session. And it has been moving from theologians to philosophers and astronomers, and the much contested definition of creating instead of transcendental space, a spatialized transcendence. Fast forward to the 20th century. In the 20th century, we saw the war of scientific worldviews and the emergence of the policy revolution. Science was seen as a policy as opposed to an ontology, and physicists took over, and then engineers, and instead of spatialized transcendence, capitalism intervened, and it was understood as monetized social concern. Came the 60s and the specter of Marxism and Stalinism as well, and this gave way to a new thinking science being the concern for government and the tool for social well-being, from agricultural scientists to physicists, and a case of point was the previous discussion. And instead of applied research, there is a need, it was argued, for fundamental research. In the late 20th century, there was a critical turn, criticizing much of what has been going on. And obviously, this is related to RRI as well, because RRI, the emergence of RRI, learned a lot from these critical tendencies. However, much of it was not applied. And if we looked at the advocacy coalitions, we saw that instead of the deep core, that is fundamental, normative, and ontological axioms, what responsible research and innovation was dealing or is dealing with is the policy core. And again, in the previous discussion, referring to what Siddharth or Swati has been bringing up, much of this has been understood on the level of policy as opposed to the level of fundamental normative and ontological beliefs. This is why I have suggested in this course a new definition of what RRI should be. RRI implementing that social actors work together to align the process and its outcomes with multiple forms of being. This is the piece of beliefs and human, non-human entanglements in the Anthropocene. If you will, this is my definition for RRI, and this is what I believe brings the piece of beliefs that's required. So I would want in this course, in the 10 days and the discussions, to have shifted the discussion from the policy core to the ontological core. And I have been asking a number of questions: whose society, whose expectations, whose values, whose desires, whose needs, whose stewardship, and whose future. And all of these questions, when answered, will lead us in the direction of what I call decolonization, questioning assumptions, questioning the institutions, and trying to teach research and innovation in a different way. I brought some examples, one of which was the world, that is the ontology of automobility. Another was the world, that is the ontology of big data, AI, and quantum. And I've been suggesting to ask questions all the time. It's not about irresponsible science. It's not about irresponsible research. It's not about bad technology. It's about the effects and impacts. And once we take this, then we can aim for a radical politics, try to create gendered perspectives, try to address decolonization, try to address issues of AI, and avoid more neoliberalization. We then will ask questions of epistemic or ontological kinds. Can you please mute yourself? Because I hear a... Thank you. I've been asking such questions of epistemological and ontological kinds. I've also been referring to exclusions and inclusions, especially related to data, but also automobility. And we can ask, together with Siddharth, what kind of power does knowledge induce, and the knowledges produced, whose knowledge they are, what kind of knowledge it is, and what kind of knowledge for what purpose and what reason. And this is not questioning whether this is good or bad. Again, it's suggesting that we should deal with the effects, and those effects not only impact other humans, but they impact non-humans and also things. And if you remember the quote from Heidegger, I think we should first and foremost attend to the violence and try to create peace of beliefs. And peace on my terms means trying to do as much as we can to avoid the violence of data, the violence of automobility, and most importantly, the violence of human thinking. So with this, I say thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for having listened. all these weeks. And now I will switch to Mentimeter, as you know it well. And I have 4 questions for you. So I am sharing my screen again. And here you are. I hope you see the code. I can also put the code in the chat. I have to stop sharing. Here is the code. Please go to menti.com and please enter. And please answer the question. I don't see anyone coming in. Yes, now on to political imagination. That's great. I love it. Please, others, go to menti.com and tell me, what have you learned from the course? Spatial transcendence. Yes, I like that too. Clarity, depth, thought dichotomy. Love it. Ethical science. Yes, nicely put. Go ahead. Give me some more. Ethical science, responsible research, clarity, new perspectives, politics of science, very good. Bioethics, curiosity, questioning. Yes, go ahead, please, some more. Deconstruction of RRI, very good. Exploration, decolonizing knowledge, yes, absolutely. Let's see what others have to say. So we have ethical science, we have thought dichotomy, questioning sustainability, decolonization. We have ontopolitical imagination, which obviously a key topic. Responsible research, deconstruction, new perspective, clarity, depth, bioethics, critical thinking, responsibility, curiosity, and exploration. Anyone else? Yes. Practical ontology, very much, yes. New idea. Okay, everybody press send now, and then we can move on to the next question. So let's see the next question. How did I, my thinking change during the course? And you can give some ideas, 250 words. How did you change or your thinking change during this course? So please, yes, you, oh, that's great. Maybe I don't have to do anything more. You became more responsible. That's great. I think I've completed the mission. I thought the science and politics are different pole. Excellent. I learned to go beyond the dichotomy of responsibility and irresponsibility. That's also great. Okay, so asking questions beyond the basic frame, which is further than primary curiosity, takes us to become more responsible. Very good. Research oriented. You became more research oriented. Wow, I like that. New parameters emerged. I like that too. Yes, I try to bring new parameters. I wouldn't call them parameters, but they are great. Absolutely. The journey started in blank, then became bold, and finally reached a beautiful result. Cool. Wow. That's nice. I will quote you. The course gave alternate perspective of how I look at this social phenomenon. The politics involved and the scope of responsibility are not something to be overlooked. Very nicely put. Thank you. How science taking initiative into ethical responsibility with much more emphasis than before. Excellent. I like these. Attending the RRI course has now enabled me to understand the political aspect of science and helped me develop a conscience for doing responsible research. Thank you. Thank you. Emerging technologies and their impacts on society. Exactly. That's what I wanted to convey. Got learn new dimensions of RRI and open access with varied case studies from Global South, Global North, along with politics of knowledge and its acceptability. Overall, it gave me new lens to look into research and innovative ideas. Yes, thank you, thank you. This is great. I like all of what you're saying, so thank you absolutely very much. Learn new paradigm of emerging technologies in research. Yes, this is great. So let me close this. Thank you very much for the comments. Please press send if you still are writing, because I have to stop sharing to go to the next. Yes, the politics in science and technology has become much more visible and has made me start to think much more about the ethics in science. Yes. Great. Okay, so everybody has sent her comments. No, it gave me new perspectives towards science and society, responsible research innovation with respect to technologies such as automobility, AI, and big data. Yes, great. That's exactly what I wanted to do. Okay, so guys, thank you very much for these comments. It's great to hear. And please don't forget that these are the learnings. Let me then offer you the next presentation or the next screen. And So here you are. I am now sharing my screen again. I hope you see it. The code, I'll put the code into the chat, which then again, I have to stop sharing. Here is the new code. So please go to Menti, and here's your new code. And now this is a true evaluation. Question is, how was the course overall? Whether it was rock and roll, whether it was library, a little bit boring, too many books, or it was like soap operas, watching TV somewhat or very boring, actually. So whether it was rock and roll, whether it was library, too many books, watching TV, somewhat boring. Okay, this looks pretty good for me. Rock and roll seems to be a good metaphor. But also library, too many books. I acknowledge and understand. There was a lot of books, I have to say. And I know this is not normally the language you speak and the type of presentations you hear, which was, I think, the point, that now you got a view that is different than your usual one. But I think this is a pretty balanced picture. 14 rock and roll, some too many books, and none of it was boring. So that's great. If anyone wants to add, we have 17 people who participated. Please, others, if someone has an opinion, then he or she should give it now. Okay, then here's your next. How was the course? And here we can do a word cloud. How was the course? Just one word, how the course was. And this is not about learning. This is evaluation. Efficient. That's, I don't know if I want to be efficient. It's pretty capitalistic, neoliberal, modernist. But it was 2 weeks, I know. 2 hours or 3 hours each day. Conceptual, interesting, intriguing. I like that. Modern science, yes. Creative, absolutely. Thought-provoking. That's I take that as a compliment. That's great. Perfectly structured. Thank you. I like that. Creative. Awesome. Thank you. That's nice. Encouraging. Annotated. These are nice words. Novel. Very good. Insightful. New perspective. Dialectical. Well done. Quest for knowledge. Absolutely. Very useful. Wow. Crisp and clear. Food for thought. But time limited. Quest for knowledge. Yes. Serendipitous. Yes. Excellent. A few more if you want. Thank you very much. Intriguing, interesting, and excellent. Informative are in the center, and that's good. But I like crisp and clear. I like useful. I like serendipitous, motivating, awesome, efficient. Food for thought. Thought-provoking. Yes. Thank you very much. This is now our word cloud. I hope Anup and Sardindu are seeing this. So this is your feedback to me. Thank you very much. Floor is open. If you want to comment, I'm very happy to listen or facilitate the conversation between you guys. I have been talking enough. You have been hearing me enough. So thank you very much. I appreciate, as Anup said, you being here. I appreciate the efforts. I appreciate those who spoke. Siddharth, Ashish, Abhindand, Swati, of course. Also, thank you very much for yesterday's presentations. I learned a lot, and just to give some feedback to you guys, I've been over dinner with my wife. I have been telling her about the presentation. So I think that's all you want in life when the professor goes home and talks about what he heard from students over the dinner table. So thank you very much for the presentations. Thank you very much again for the comments and being active throughout. And of course, thank you, Anup, and thank you, Sardindu, for inviting me. It was a great experience for me too. And I hope that I'll be back. Thank you.
So there is one thing is remaining, that is future collaboration or any kind of that. So for that, actually, I have not published the list of participants as yet. So I will publish it very soon so that you can also interact with each other. And we can also create one Google group, so or any other group, like we have WhatsApp and many other ways to create group. So we can create that group and we can share our ideas or anything that can be collaborative in nature. And
that's a great idea. And I forgot to say that obviously I am very happy to answer any of your questions on email or any of your requests, should you have any. But I think this is a great idea from Anup, that we can have a group on whatever medium you like to use, and then we can continue the exchange, and I would love to be part of that. Tanya has her hand up, so maybe we should listen to her.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, for the lovely presentation today. I just wanted to talk about that. So, as you talked about in previous lectures, that how science emerged in 15th to 16th century, and after the Great Depression, as we all know, there started a great emphasis upon developing social sciences. So, to address the real concerns coming out of the wrongdoings of the war and so on. So, why is that the politicians, specifically the nation state in general, give much more emphasis on science and technology than social sciences if combined, like long ago, which could have been made a better foundational base for today's techno world? Like there was military reasons, and there was a concern to develop country and the life to get better overall, but still was that just because of the hardship social sciences and their research concludes on the technology being created, or there is another reason, like why social sciences and their ethical worries have been always ignored, and science is always a priority?
Tanya, that's the multi-million-dollar question. And definitely it's not something that I can answer. This, if anything, besides the future of my children, this keeps me awake during nights. I don't know the answer, and I wish I had, because it's, from my vantage point, so trivial. There have been so much knowledge amassed by social sciences over the centuries that could be so useful for making the world somewhat better. But yes, as you say, it's shoved aside in the natural sciences, the world of mathematics and physics. And this is obviously not to speak about physics professors have always been seen as more important. I don't know the answer, I have to say. But Tanya, if you ever find the answer, please remember me and drop me a mail.
Sure, sir. Sure. Thank you so much, sir.
Any other observation from the participant? Any overall feedback from any of the participants? I got some feedback on chat. Those are very brief. So, Abhinandan, I don't think still there.
Yeah.
Do you want to have some feedback?
It's actually, when you say feedback, actually, it's a very, what to say, heavy word, because sometimes it's the last word that someone hear about. But I think this is a journey that I think at some point, thanks to, of course, to Anup and of course, Dr. Bhaduri and Professor Robert, I think this is an initiation, I think, that should be carried forward. And it has opened up, I think, a lot of, what to say, the mind of the curiosity have actually come up here, because these are some questions that we always asked, but never had any, a forum to discuss it in such a wider manner. And I think, thanks once again for giving us this opportunity to get an idea from different intersectionalities, because coming in from different because as I can understand, that I was reading today a quotation. It came up, of course, in Facebook, that I think it's related with that when war ends, actually it ends up in islands. So I think this is something that we have to take back on board. That when you're talking about the knowledge systems, yes, of course, we can talk about different congruence model, but keeping in mind ethics, keeping in mind the importance of diversity, biodiversity, and also different cultural essence, because so that at some point science can, what I can understand, the science can be celebrated in the real essence of inclusivity and enrichment. That's what I have to say. And I think it was really I would say really I felt really good, like, because I am teaching right now in Data and Social Science paper on technology development in society. And I think it's a CBCS paper, which I've been have to design according to the university system, UGC system. But when I go home, when I'm going to start the next lecture, now I have to think twice that where exactly I have to bring a new adage to the whole understanding. It was nearly good for me, and I think at some point even I would definitely encourage my colleagues also to look forward to this course. And hopefully it's not, I think it should not be only confined to so-called the discussion, but I think in fact it has motivated me now to think about an indigenous research methodology unit in Northeast India, because it has given me some sort of an understanding that somewhere down the line, everyone is speaking the same thing, but in a different way or the other. But how to make this come to a particular platform? For that, I think we need to actually address the epistemology as well as wisdom ontology. And thanks once again, Professor Robert, because many a times I have been asking you the question, but at the same time, I salute your patience and hearing to all the questions that have been bombarded to you. And at the same time, I like the way how you handle it, because as a true philosopher, there was always a question that ends in you, but every question has a beginning, and that's what I have to say at last. Thank you once again, the entire team of JNU. We'll definitely look forward to meet you in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Abhinandan, for your wonderful words. And now I would like to formally thank our student volunteer, which Ashish Gosai, who is going to submit his PhD thesis very soon. And if Ashish is online, so can I ask him to say some words? Ashish, what do you? Oh, okay, Swati, please go ahead.
It's been a great experience for me because I've been working in this area. So it's been like once you are working only into a specific area, you start taking it as often like ideal thing or something like that. For me, the entire experience was like reality check. Because thanks to Brown, because he gave me a reality check of lot of things actually. What is into theory and what is into reality, there is a huge gap. And I'm really grateful actually, I've noted it down. I got quite a few ideas to work on in future actually. And I also can see that this RI, which I was like completely fascinated by its action orientation, it also somewhere have trends of those bureaucratic writing kind of things and becoming like getting caught up into that ivory tower of knowledge generation. Or so it's been a great learning experience, and I'm looking forward to work in this area, and then to develop certain methodologies which are like more practical and more like more people oriented. So I'm really thankful to the entire team, organizing team. Thank you, Anoop sir, Sadindu sir, and thank you, Robert, for your time and like input. And what Abhinandan said, like I'm really inspired how like he never get bugged up and always have such kind of smile and patience. That's something like, yeah, a quality of maybe philosopher. I still need to learn all those things. Thank you.
Very wonderful words from you. And Dr. Ayesha is with us. He already completed one GIAN program as course coordinator. So can you please say something about this course?
Thank you so much for this opportunity. So first of all, thank you, Professor Robert, for your very interesting lecture, and it's given me a new perspective because I come from science. As I said initially, I work in the area of intelligent transportation and trying to build ADAS systems for unstructured environments such as in our country. And your lectures have been very thought-provoking. It also brings in a lot of thoughts regarding how we should go about doing this. As you said, it will create a lot of chaos. So how can we reduce that chaos and really work towards improving things for the society? That is what we want to do. And I would also like to thank Professor Saradindu and Dr. Anoop for this course. This has been a very interesting course and very well managed over Zoom. When I did the course, when I organized the course, it was in 2016 December. We had Professor Shekhar from USA taking a course on spatial data analytics. So I think organizing it in person was a very different ball game altogether, but much easier since we could just get together and talk and discuss. But over here also there's been a lot of interaction, and that has made this course even better, I would say. Thank you so much, and thank you again. Namaste.
One thing is sure that we could accommodate many participants who are located far away place. So this is the advantage of having one virtual course, and if in-person course we would have different kind of participants. So that is the thing.
So we did miss meeting Professor Robert and the rest of the participants and you all, and the chai and samosa at GNU, which is a high point in the course.
Okay. Yeah.
On the likely news. And I do hope that sometime next when you are visiting Professor Robert, I get to meet you. I'm also from JNU. I am the computer science department. Thank you so much.
So if you are organizing any workshop here, Professor Robert, so let us know. We'll circulate among our participant. Yeah.
We will be happy to.
Yeah. Because he is engaged in different projects where Indian counterpart is also there, so we can have some kind of interaction in the face-to-face kind of lectures. Anyway, any other participants wants to have any feedback or anything to say? One thing is that what Professor Patnaik said, that it is a requirement for the course to all the participants to enroll on GIAN portal, and after enrolling you choose this course, and tomorrow is the last official day. So whenever you have time, just try to complete the registration process, and certificate will be issued next week, because of we are having holidays this week, Friday and other days. Today also half holiday. We call it a restricted holiday. So many participants could not join because of their other engagements. So I think we can have that certificate ready in the next week, and then we'll send by scan copy by email or by post, or whoever in the campus, they can collect it from our office. So that is the possibility. And I would like to formally thank GIAN office in JNU. So we have Mr. Ram Singh and some other people who are helping in organizing the course, and also Professor Patnaik, who is JNU GIAN coordinator. So he also helped a lot for organizing this course. And formally, I would like to thank Professor Robert Brown, because he wanted to have one physical GIAN course, but we could not organize this time. But we can have some follow-up, any kind of workshop or any kind of event here. If any funding is available from the ministry, and also we can explore other possibilities. So, any final words from you, Professor Robert?
I just wanted to thank you, everyone, for the nice words. And I have to say, I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you and being with you. And I have to say, it was fun for me too. This is, I am not doing this because I have to, but I'm doing this because I like it. And definitely, this was a great experience. So thank you, everybody, for the participation. Thank you, Anup, for coordinating, and thank you for being the master of ceremony every day. Saradindu for also organizing, and obviously GIAN for the finances. I think it was fun. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope we'll continue the discussion on other media. And then eventually, as Ayesha has said, we'll meet in person. So with that, thank you.
Finally, I would like to request all of you to switch on your video so that we can have a group photo. Excellent. Yeah. So we can capture it, or wherever you have time, you can visit our YouTube channel. You can also see the group photo there. So thank you. Okay. You want to say something? Bhadesh? Okay, so now it's time to
Yes,
say
sir.
goodbye.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much. Thank you so much, Brown sir. It was a very informative, and since last 1 week we are continuously listening, and even sometime even today in the morning as well, I saw all your lectures by revising again for the assessment, and it was too informative and very detailed manner. We have got all the things fast time. So thank you so much, sir, and thank you, Anup sir, for organizing such kind of program, and it is very much helpful for us.
Okay, thank you for joining.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So it is. Is there any other remark from the audience or from the participant? If there is no, so I would like to thank all of you.
I would just
Okay.
say that I would thank Professor Robert Brown, sir, to give a philosophical stimulation. So thank you so much. That's my comment. And thank you so much to Anup sir and Saradindu sir as well.
Actually, Dr. Saradindu Bhaduri could not join today. He's traveling. So, on behalf of him also, I'd like to express thanks to all of you, all participants, and our Professor Robert Brown for this stimulating discussion and dialogue. And goodbye for the time being, and we'll share our thoughts through email or some other means. Thank you all.